Let's welcome in my British boyfriend. He joins us from the MeidasTouch network. You know, they are amazing in the work they do, and he is chief among them. Everything he says makes you swoon. He is authentically British, but desperately trying to help us Americans. Anthony Davis, everyone. Yes. Oh, my God. Anthony Davis, the day has come.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. I know MeidasTouch Network has blown up. Your videos and your takes on things draw many, many views. And I, among the viewers, was very impressed by something you said at the beginning of one of your videos. And it was this. It was, we know that if Donald Trump doesn't win the election, he's going to deny the result and cry fraud. We know this. And then you asked, is that really the person you want to be president of the United States?
It seems pretty simple, doesn't it? When you kind of put it into that language, that he is undoubtedly, I mean, there's been a lot of coverage of that this morning already, that he is undoubtedly being advised by Steve Bannon and Roger Stone and Rudy Giuliani and all of the usual suspects, that he needs to claim victory as soon as possible today in this election. So as soon as it looks like it's heading in his direction, and we know about the red Mirage, of course, this idea of, well, it's not an idea, it's a reality. The way that they count the votes tends to be in the kind of red districts first, because that's just how it is. When you get to the metropolises, that is where the blue votes are found. And so it will undoubtedly, as it did in 2020, look like he's doing better than he is, and then he will call it for himself. Do we want somebody who is prepared to behave in that way? Which is a dictator, by the way. That is authoritarianism. That is despotism. We can dress it up however we like. Oh, he's just self-absorbed. He's just old. No, this is a very specific, targeted strategy to steal the election. And he will stop at nothing.
The course of the electorate, as you look at it, we see an animated women's vote, right? Apart from that, and by the way, it's important to note, just because you have an animated women's vote, and obviously it's animated by the rollback of Roe on some level, but it's not in any way clear that, you know, somehow some overwhelming majority of women are going to vote for Kamala Harris. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of reports and drill downs that suggest that there are chunks of women who make up a conservative movement in this country who are holding their nose and voting for Trump. But apart from the women's vote, because I still think that, you know, if they really show up, the women who should be rightfully angry about what's happening in this country, if they really show up, I think it could really propel this election in a direction that would favor Kamala Harris. Aren't there others? I see other groups that might be underpolled, Anthony Davis. I'll give you one example, and that's the youth vote.
I'll give you another. The feminists, like myself. Because, you know, Roe is not just about women, right? It takes two to tango. And I firmly believe that there's going to be a whole lot of men like myself, who are partners and we are parents and we've been through the pregnancy with our wives. And, you know, we had to get a termination of a first baby because it had Patau syndrome, was tested, very traumatic, went through this whole thing. You know, I'm being very honest about this. And, you know, it was as traumatic for me as the partner. And I was a feminist before then, but man, what women have to go through with this stuff, it is unfathomable. And so we don't seem to get counted in the polling either. People like me who have been through the trauma of abortion, termination, planned termination, in this case for medical reasons. There's millions of us, Mark, millions of us. And again, we do not show up in the polling. And so I firmly believe that, yes, of course, abortion is going to be one of the major issues. And because of course Trump, all the stuff that has kind of gone to shit since Donald Trump showed up has pretty much happened since he was president, right? And he lost the last election in 2020. And so all of this stuff is weighing on people's minds from January 6th, the youth vote you mentioned, and is quite right because younger people are born progressive. They are born into a society that recognizes the issues surrounding climate change and equality and diversity. That is just part of growing up in a modern society. They don't have that point of reference from 40, 50 years ago where your parents were a little bit racist. And I just think that the world has changed, and Donald Trump's presidency and also his campaign is aimed at people who lived in the 1970s. It's not aimed at people who live in the 2020s and beyond.
Yeah, it's like we were saying about his view of Mexico. It's just this as though somehow Mexico is just a dog you can put on a leash, and the leash is tariffs. It's absurd. It's when he floated the "I'm going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it." I mean, it was just this view of Mexico as this, as the hired help.
It's a simplistic view of the world. He honestly thinks that if you've got 5 people in a room and 2 of them have brown skin, that the 3 people remaining, the white people, are all going to have the same opinion about the 2 others. That's how he works. And that's not what the world is like anymore. And their fear of this changing demographic, they call it the Great Replacement theory, this whole conspiracy theory. I mean, at the end of the day, they are just white supremacists, and they hate the fact that the world looks different to how it was when they held all the power. And if I can quote Stephen Miller, Donald Trump's closest advisor and speechwriter, at the Nazi rally the other day, America is for Americans and Americans only.
It was astounding, that rally. It really was. This is interesting. I want to ask you about this. Karen is saying the young male bros that Trump was supporting, they typically don't, that I guess means supporting Trump is what she means. They typically don't vote. They show up for the party and fun, but they don't vote. Young women do. My notion about that is that that's true, what Karen is saying. There is a huge following that Joe Rogan has. We'll just use him as that kind of frat boy machismo crew, the bro vote.
Yeah.
Tell me your take on what percentage of that huge number actually show up.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he has the most viewed podcast in America, right? I was going to say the world. Maybe it is the world. Who knows? Now, I can't really stomach more than 7 minutes of that show because I am the antithesis as a kind of modern, bald feminist, immigrant. I'm like, I am not his target audience. Now, I watched it for the Donald Trump episode, and I've watched it recently for the Elon Musk, done a couple of episodes, including one last night where they just lied and lied and lied. I have always been of the opinion, Mark, watching Joe Rogan, that he is on the far right. And yet, people are like, oh, but he endorsed Bernie, and he endorsed Biden. And it's like, I don't care who he endorsed. The guy is a showman, right? I care who he really is. And what I get from him, and I don't know him, so I'm just speculating, is that he is one of these chauvinists who, if he was in a room with the 5 people, 2 black ones and 3 white ones, he would think that he had commonality with his white friends. And if you threw a couple of females into the mix as well, he would definitely gravitate towards the boys. And I just feel like it's just so irrelevant these days. Like your gender, your age, your race, these things are irrelevant. Like we should be able to coexist. I mean, you and I are friends, and yet there's 30 years between us. So
I beg your pardon.
What?
So
Who is having that conversation?
I was joking with that last sequence, by the way. I should have said 50 years. It would have then made it clearer that it was a joke rather than the truth.
You felt 30 was arguably the case.
Yeah, I thought it was a safe bet, but actually I clearly made a mistake there. But the point that I want to make is that I moved to America because of its diversity and because of its integration. Because, you know, race and racism is different in England. It's a very different world. You know, there we brought the Windrush generation from the Caribbean to help us rebuild after the Second World War. We have very different communities of black people living amongst white people. We have just... Well, the Conservative Party in the UK has just elected a black female who grew up in Nigeria to lead the Conservative Party. Can you imagine anything like that happening in the United States of America? And whilst I might not agree with her political position, I am thrilled that somebody of her gender and of her race is being given a shot in a top job in our parliament.
Just because you mentioned it, I mean, the idea in this country, I think increasingly on the GOP side, is there's just tokenism on the, it's offensive. They put black faces in various shots because they want to show diversity. You have people like, is it Byron Donald and you know, Herschel Walker? We have this video of him, you know, on the stump, and they actually they ran Herschel Walker for Senate until the whole thing imploded. I mean, it was a real... He was clearly going to be a puppet. I mean, he had no interest in governance. You know that if you just listen to the guy, you know, speak for 5 minutes.
But a lot of these people are, you know, their pigmentation might be black, but they're very white on the inside. And so I think that, you know, again, that's another reason why we need to kind of stop talking about people's skin tone as being relevant, because it's about who you are. And so when you ask me about Joe Rogan, just to complete the weave, when you ask me about Joe Rogan, I see somebody who is, to me, increasingly irrelevant in society, and yet he has this huge podcast. I mean, he has people on that I would just never give a platform to, like Jordan Peterson, people who he gives credence to. These people are nut jobs. RFK Jr. It's like, and Elon Musk now, who is not only just in the tank for Trump, but has been legally given the right to pay $1 million for a vote every time.
He's trying to buy a president. He really is.
And that's what rich white supremacists do. You know, all they can do is fall back on their wealth and their riches. And
well,
so they pay the money.
Elon Musk actually comes from a country that had a white supremacy well in place during the time that he was raised, South Africa. The thing about, as you suggest, he may be with a message and with certainly the kind of cultism around these people, RFK Jr. and Elon Musk. By the way, just because I mentioned them, explain that to me. The cultism around RFK Jr., I've seen it as far broader than I ever thought it would catch on. I mean, people I know who are very smart are so much in the thrall of this guy that they have followed him all the way over to endorsing and voting for Donald Trump.
And Trump's now saying that he would basically give him control of all of health and human services.
He doesn't care. Trump doesn't care. He'll be on the golf course.
Yeah, he don't care. But the point that you're making is very interesting because you're, again, you know, we categorize people, don't we? We say, oh, well, they're highly intelligent, and yet they follow RFK. And it's the same as us categorizing people based on their skin pigmentation. We got to stop doing that because, you know, in my opinion, if you think that RFK has anything interesting to say about vaccines or COVID or anything, then you have just been radicalized through misinformation. So I don't blame you. It's so difficult now for people to recognize the difference between what is fact and what is opinion because it all looks the same. And so even intelligent people can be brainwashed. Even intelligent people, highly educated people, highly respected people, highly eloquent people can still be drawn into a cult.
Sure.
We all have vulnerabilities.
Right. It's just that in the case of, and I think that what really energized RFK Jr. for many people, and I think it's in the case of many of those who I'm speaking of, what really energized him was the anti-vax movement around COVID. Yeah. And you find that changed this election in a way. People, we may or may not see it actually come home to roost, but that popularity that RFK Jr. has, that has now been pushed to Trump, that third-party popularity, a lot of it, the rallying point was COVID-19 and the vaccine.
You got to understand that, people who don't have any skills or talent, like RFK Jr., just trading off the family name, they need to make a living. And so he found that, he was a environmental lawyer for a long time. But the guy finds that actually he gets traction when he does the anti-vax stuff. And so he runs with it. And a lot of people have done this, and I'm sure Joe Rogan did this at the beginning of his podcast too. His views aren't necessarily the views that he presents on the show, but he found an audience. And so in order to keep the money coming in and the sponsorships and everything, you just have to kind of go where the dollar signs are. And I feel that that's what RFK has done. He basically went so far down his own rabbit hole on the anti-vax stuff because he found an audience there. He started to deny that stuff recently, didn't he? When he was running for president, he's like, I never said that stuff. And then the news people showed him the clips of him saying it. And he was like, The guy, unfortunately, is also nuts, right? Because he's been a drug user. His brain don't work so well. So the guy is heavily compromised. I just feel sorry for all these people, but I just don't think that they should be working in the public arena. Because people like RFK Jr. are dangerous, because if you don't believe in the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, then your kids could get very ill. And if you don't want to, I've had 5 COVID vaccines. Now, admittedly, I had a full head of hair before I started taking those, but aside from that, I've had no side effects. And this is the point, is that when it comes to public health, you can't just kind of think, I'm going to make money out of this.
The danger of what you're alluding to, I think, is that when you're in power and public policy is now in your hands to make these pronouncements that got you there, maybe on some level, is one thing. But now, as you've suggested, you're dealing with taking care of real people and real lives, and you can do real damage with the kind of public policy that's associated with the health policy that a Trump administration would put in place.
And the abortion conversation is connected to that too. Because, of course, the Republicans have this huge movement where they've set up these clinics which pretend to be abortion clinics, but actually are just staffed with people who are going to talk you out of having an abortion. I mean, it is remarkable that that is allowed to happen. And abortion is healthcare. It is just healthcare. It's not. Someone wrote to me this morning and they're like, can you please stop calling it a woman's right to choose and call it a woman's healthcare? And I'm like, yeah, I think maybe that is going to be the right thing to say from this point onwards.
I mean, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because obviously I know that we're running out of time, and I know that you've been doing the show for a good couple of hours now, and you're probably ready for a coffee. But
please
I just
continue. There is no exit sign I can even see whenever I'm speaking with you.
No exit ramp, unfortunately. Yeah. Not for another 10 miles at least. But I would say that I know that there is a lot of anxiety today surrounding this election. And, when you introduced me, you were saying, Trump could be the president. Trump will not be the president. He will not be the president. And I say that because I've been working on this guy, analyzing him and analyzing it for a decade, as you have too. There is not an ounce of doubt in my mind that he isn't going to lose.
Where did you see him in the election that he actually won? Did you make these same courageous pronouncements then?
I wasn't as engaged back then. I was planning on moving to the US. I moved here in January 2016, a week before his inauguration.
I see. Okay. Well, yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I, like a lot of people, thought that I was moving to Hillary Clinton's America.
Right.
And so, but I ain't going to make that mistake again. And, he won in 2016 because of 3 things. Say them with me. James Comey, who made that speech a week before the election.
Absolutely.
Russia and their meddling, which they are still doing again as we speak. And number 3, The Apprentice. People thought they were voting for that guy off the TV show. And
That's
he was
absolutely true.
never that guy. He was an actor playing the role of a successful businessman. He was a 6-time bankrupt, just a snake oil salesman. And to me, it was a perfect storm of those three things that got him elected. You could even add that he was playing the role of an anti-establishment, I'm not a politician, that whole thing, which helped
Well, that
as well.
outsider thing he could play,
Yeah.
it's always been a thing,
Yeah.
right?
But
You
he can't do that anymore.
No.
You know, we know what dish he's serving up for dinner, and it don't taste very nice.
Well, the problem is, I think that people forget it's an odd thing. I'm so surprised he has any support whatsoever.
I'm
But
not.
I get there's sort of a politics of trolling. I was saying this to David K. Johnston last hour.
Yeah.
That America, there's a part of America that really enjoys kind of owning the libs and the politics of smear, the
Yes.
politics of smack talk. Those people are empowered by Donald Trump, and they show up in pretty big numbers.
Well, I compare it to movies, right? Look at all the American films that are successful. They're all quite violent, you know? There's lots of shooting and stabbing and screaming and somebody wins and they're like, yes, victorious. And if you look at British films, you know, like the films that are made by Mike Leigh or, you know, British directors, they're about kind of old ladies and their emotional turmoil with their next door neighbor. Oh no, I don't think I could do that another 4 years. And so, you know, that's the difference between the countries. And so America, there is always going to be a kind of UFC angle to America. And that is the Joe Rogan thing you're talking about. Donald Trump buys into that. But Kamala Harris is the antidote to that toxic masculinity. And I'm done with that now, you know? I'm going to start identifying as nothing. I'm going to have no pronouns. I would like us all just to be one humane race.
Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? I mean, the divisions, it feels as though they're more pronounced and prominent than ever. But I'd love to see it go the other way. I was talking about how we've been a country that's evolved to a better place for a time. I mean, it's been a very uncomfortable evolution through the civil rights movement, et cetera. Women's suffrage, you can go all the way back. But now I feel as though we're devolving a little bit with the rise of Trumpism and the alt-right and a Christian theocracy that's taken over the Supreme Court. It's scary. But
But let's call it the fall of Trumpism, because this is the end of the chapter. It's not a continuation. This is the season finale you're getting today. And I look forward to talking with you later tonight or tomorrow and having the opportunity to say, told you so.
Oh, that'd be great. It really would be. Kim, do you have anything for Anthony Davis on the way out? And you have to unmute.
What's interesting is that you just said that this is the end of Trump. Like, this is the swan song, if you will, that once this is over, we're never going to have to deal with it again. But I was reading, actually did a story earlier about a poll taken of likely voters and also of Trump supporters. Most Trump supporters, obviously, want to see him run again, but the numbers were astronomical. And I think Mark said he would be, 83, 84? He says he won't run again, but his ego might push him that way. We could see we had to go through this all over again in another 4 years.
Not a chance. Not a chance. I mean, the guy is checked out. Can you not see it? He's like blowjobbing the microphone at rallies.
Unbelievable.
That is not the behavior of somebody who sees themselves as an elder statesman. He is completely checked out. He just doesn't want to go to prison. That's the only thing he cares about.
Anthony Davis and I are in complete agreement on this.
Yeah.
And I'd say one other thing, too. There's a pure political play here, too, that's not being talked about. If Trump loses, he's a loser. He's lost 2020, he lost the midterms, and he lost this one. He's a loser. I'm telling you, you will be astounded at how quickly he has 10-foot pole marks all over him. No one's going to want to go near him. So that's the other part of this. There's the political fact that Donald Trump doesn't take the GOP to where they want to go. So I hope the predictions of Anthony Davis come to pass. However it goes down, we love talking to you. Anthony Davis on the MeidasTouch Network. I know. He's so sexy, he's so articulate, and the way he speaks is so intoxicating. I can't wait till next time. Thank you, Anthony Davis. Come on.
Thank you, Mark.
What a day. Appreciate you being here, my friend, always. Thank you. Anthony Davis.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.